little bit off course, but not all, completely off course. I mean, legit like top 5, but there probably won't be. There's probably one in there that might be a wrench in it, but
Okay.
But yeah, so I'll get her going here. All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 9 of the Hockey Toolkit. I am Trevor DiCarlo.
I'm Andrew Trimble. Are you sure this is 9?
Is it 9? I don't know. I feel like maybe it's 10. Is it 10? Damn it. Hold on.
It's they become so popular so quickly that
I know.
It's just a whirlwind. It's a whirlwind.
I gotta now I have to look it up because I keep changing and screwing it up in my own stuff. So let's see here. We are on this is episode okay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 10 of the Hockey Toolkit. I am Trevor DiCarlo.
I am Andrew Trimble, the co-host of episode 10.
Episode 10, yes. I almost did a Ron Burgundy of I'm Trevor DiCarlo, but yes, episode 10. It's actually it's going to be a little bit more of a unique format today, a little bit more different than usual. But before we jump into all that fun stuff, Coach, how's it going?
Good. We're almost at the playoffs here. We got our playoff date set for our EHL team that starts on the 9th. Our P team has a game tomorrow, actually, and then that'll determine a big part of their playoff seedings. Our 16s, their high school season's almost done, so the kids will be coming back and practicing for about 2 weeks before they head to Buffalo for nationals. And my son's season is pretty much at the end there. So it's been a fun year, and we're looking forward to a nice little spring here in New Hampshire. How about yourself, Trevor?
Oh, yeah. So season, at least spring season, is going to be picking up here. And we actually have tryouts starting, Sunday and Monday. And those are Monday's the callback day. And then after that, a little bit of a break. I will be going out and seeing the Big Ten semifinals out in Minnesota. So
nice.
Yeah. So and then I'll be coming back and just hit the ground running with my squirt team, my 9-year-olds I'll have. So
that'll be awesome.
Yeah, I can't complain. It's I'm looking forward to it. So it's kind of hockey here, but what is going on with professional hockey right now?
No, it's trade deadline, so it's silly season. I know that the Devils are my team. They're loading up. We got big Timo Meier coming in. We didn't really give up too many roster players, so the kind of roster stays intact. You're just adding to it. I liked Zetterlund. I think the young defensemen they gave away are going to be good players, but they keep the core intact and they keep their high, their biggest youth assets like Luke Hughes and Simone Nemec in the building. So it's exciting to see what's going on. And Chicago, holy smokes, you got the biggest news of all.
I know. I
end of an era.
I know, the end. I mean, we still have Taves, but he's pretty much done for the year. But yeah, Patty Kane, he's now a New York Ranger, which again, as we were talking a little bit earlier, I'm happy for him that he gets to go to a team that's actually trying to compete and win. The Blackhawks have been a dumpster fire this year, and he's been a real trooper, I think, because he's never really had like a quality number 2 center, and every time he gets one, they just traded him away. It's like Taves always gets whoever he wants to play with, but it's like Kane, like, oh yeah, we'll give you the brinket for like 2 years, and then boom, he's gone. So I'm happy for him. It's cool that he gets to go back and play the bread man a little bit. We'll see what happens there. But I don't know. The Rangers, it's going to be a tough East. I mean, the West is going to be, they might have an easier, whoever goes to the finals from the West might have a little bit easier run there than anyone in the East, because I would say the Bruins maybe before the trade deadline, but right now, I mean, Rangers, Devils, Lightning are trading asinine stuff for, one guy who had one great season so far, but they're always good. So I'm looking forward to
everybody's talking about the Bruins because of their unbelievable year, which it is. It's like almost a historic type year the way they've had. And then the assets that are being accumulated by, the Rangers and Toronto and the Devils, and like you said, the Lightning. But the team that's still been at the top, right, the Bruins' heels, they're not adding anybody, and maybe they don't need to. The Hurricanes are pretty sick too.
I got that is my between them and the Lightning, my second favorite team, only because I got family in Carolina, and yeah, it's again it was a big 2-vote Teravainen, ex-Blackhawk, who they threw away again early, but not threw away, but traded. I really like them watching them play, the bunch of jerks that they are, but it's gonna be. I couldn't even tell you. I wouldn't even put money down. I mean, I might put money down, but I couldn't tell you which team it is right now. I might have to do it before the trade deadline, before someone gets like one more superstar. I think, what did I just see? Somebody else just got traded in the last, like, I don't know, half hour or hour. I mean, it's just like nonstop. My phone's been going off with, oh, hey, guess what? This guy's got traded, or this guy's just traded.
Wow.
Guys I didn't even know could get traded. Not Brian, but Jonathan Quick got traded.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, that's pretty unreal.
That's a shocker, but so yeah, but today's episode, USA versus Canada hockey. It's not your typical USA versus Canada where we're talking about like Olympics or anything like that, but more or less like the development models. And we got a great interview with Justin Soryal. Definitely really enjoyed hearing about him and his development, as he's from not upper, but say the southern Ontario.
Yep, same town as Connor McDavid, actually.
Wow.
Newmarket guy.
All right, so he's the second most famous person from that area.
I think he, Justin played at the second best league in the world, and played in, is an Ontario League champion. But I think there's probably 50 NHL guys from Newmarket. I'd have to look up their elite prospects.
It was actually going back, and like I said, I looked at it. He played with some players that really, like, again, Murderers Row, just guys that went up, and including him. I mean, I know he didn't get any chance at the show, but just the guys that he played with. I mean, I'm sure he's got some great stories that we didn't even have time to dabble into, but I'm sure if you get a couple of beers, and I'm sure there's some great ones.
Well, it's a funny time of the year. This is tryout season. You got tryouts coming up. My 7-year-old has tryouts. You got tryouts for junior teams and all that kind of stuff coming up. And people want to know the benefits and the downsides for different organizations and what works for your organization. So I think this is a good topic to discuss, not only from the perspective of what happens here in the United States and what happens in Canada, but what we're seeing in different organizations and what can make your organization attractive compared to other organizations. So, let's give a background. Trevor, with your organization, what does a typical week look like, and what is the development model at the youth level for your organization in Chicago?
So the one that I currently work with, let's just talk at the under 15U level. So we'll go 14U and under. The players are on the ice one night a week for about, I think, 50 minutes for a skills session that's ran by a dedicated skills instructor. And then from there, they've got 2 more practices slots. I think they're about an hour apiece. And then they have just like a home ice slot that they can use for either a game, like a league game. And if they don't schedule anything that one, they get it as just a regular practice slot. So you're looking at up to, for sure, 4 times a week on the ice. And we also have one night a week of off ice that is ran through the Illinois Bone and Joint Institute, who basically, they do a lot of like rehabs and stuff, but it's also just like, again, all of your off ice needs. So that's what it looks like at the youth level, that in the program that I'm with right now. My season though, with the midget level, we're on the ice twice a week, and as well as off ice. Our practice slots were just longer, and that's honestly, that seems to be pretty much par for the course for most programs. Is you're looking at 3 hours of practice a week, / you might get that skill session as one of your hours, and then you got your game slot on the weekend. What about out by you guys?
Our program is a little bit different in terms we compartmentalize a little bit what kids are looking for. So we have a split season midget team. They practice twice a week. One of those practices is a skill session run by our junior coaches. And then they have games, probably about in the 15 to 20 game range, including playoffs. Then we have our tier 2 program, which has a U16 and we'll have a U18 next year. And they have 3 practices a week plus games. It includes a skill session. And then our junior model, we call it our DENA development model. That's 2 ice sessions a day, and that's at the junior level, our EHL Premier and our EHL team. And they practice basically 5 days a week with usually 2 games on the weekend, depending upon our opponents and things like that. So it's a little bit different. But one of the things I always took from our conversations with Justin, coming from the Canadian school, was how it's more town-based. So, like, you really have to petition to leave that town if you want to play for a different program. And I think that creates kind of a unique scenario where your competition, you know who you're competing against, and you can build some really great friendships and you can build some really great teams when you're all staying together from, the time of year 7 to maybe year 15 or so. Whereas, and certainly in our area, it's very different, where it's kind of like you have kids who go different programs every single year to either follow a coach or try something new, because there's no kind of protection for those towns. What's it like in Chicago?
So Chicago, it's not community-based, and I think the closest you would find to that in the States would be Minnesota, as we've talked about before. Yeah. But in Chicago, it's kind of the same thing, where with what you said, you can bounce around. We do have the governing body for Illinois hockey does have rules in place where you only get a certain amount of choices for your entire youth career, and that's 2 choices up until your first year of midgets, so your first year of 15U, and then you get 1 more, and that's to kind of cut down on clubs, kids bouncing the club, coach chasing. We also don't have it where coaches or players can go, like, say any kid that I coached this past year, even though I'm coaching sports next year, say I was to go to a different club and coach the same level, where, a 15-year-old could still play for me at 16U. Technically, the league rules state, or not league, but the governing body's rules state that they cannot they cannot play for me for an entire year. So, now, do clubs sometimes fudge that a little bit? Yeah, sometimes they'll have a coach. Like, I've seen it happen with some parent coaches, where they'll follow like a parent coach who was a head coach or an assistant, and now they're assistant here. And there really shouldn't be the kids on the team, but whatever it may be. But you don't see it too often, and there is an appeals process for the 2 choices. You can potentially get a third choice, say at your 12U or 14U level, but it's really difficult because, again, they're trying to stop kids from bouncing from one club to the other. Like, some of the reasons might be like basically just whatever type of hardship. I've seen it for kids whose parents have gotten divorced. Mom lives, an hour north of where the rink's at, and there's a rink that's 15 minutes closer, or, they may be health reasons for someone in the family or the kid or whatever. But that's kind of where it is. I actually like that kids can't bounce around too much, because, again, I've, started off at a small club, and it was, trying to retain your talented players, where you've got clubs, the big clubs, who want your top players, and they can afford to, we lose 2 or 3 kids because we pissed them off because we took this kid. They're, they can do that, where if I lost one of our top players, that might start a trickle-down effect, and some people might get worried, and then they bail and go somewhere else. So,
yeah.
That's what the landscape out here in Chicago is. So.
Yeah, if I could create a perfect template, I would have a community-based team where you could have a competitive team with the same coach or similar coaches.
Absolutely.
The kids can have those 10-year relationships where they grow up together. That's what I'd like to have, but inevitably we live in a democracy, right?
Free market society, yes.
A free market society, and programs don't offer the same things. And as a parent now, I look at what is offered at one program to what's offered at the other program, and you want the best for your kids. So you kind of make the decisions based upon that. It brings up a great question, I think, with the ADM, and if you had to construct with the Canadian mindset and with the American mindset and the ADM and all those things, if you could have to construct a perfect program run by Trevor DiCarlo, what would that program look like?
Well, I mean, if we're talking travel level hockey. You know,
And it
again,
doesn't have to be like AAA, AA, just like the ideal model.
the ideal model is that, you know, I do like a lot of the stuff that they do with the ADM. I'll put that out there. I'm a big proponent of it. You know, the ideal model for me would be, again, younger ages. It's very skills and concepts focused. You know, you know, everybody's trying to get away from the names, but U8 and under, you know, even U10, I have no problem with kids playing half ice. As you get older, then you're starting to teach them, you know, look, you're still teaching concepts. So it's a lot of skills and concepts at the younger ages. And when we're talking, you know, about U14 and up, you can start introducing a little bit more, I guess you could say, systems. But I would want continuity throughout the whole program. So you've got to, you know, teach at U8s, U10s, you know, U8s, you're teaching them A, B, and C, so that the coach at the U10s can teach them, build off that, and can teach them, you know, D, E, and F, and then, you know, get the U14 or U12s, whatever, U14s, and that coach is building off of that. That way you're not reinventing the wheel. And again, there's always going to be a little bit of, you know, review, but you're able to expound more and hopefully develop more, because it's no different than when you're taking your kids to school. You know, they're not going to teach Barrett. I hope not. They're not going to have him, you know, do long division and multiple. I don't even do long division anymore, but multiplication before he even knows how to count to 10, or before he even knows how to add and subtract, you know, 10 from 7. Like, these are things that you need to know. And I think a lot of clubs, you know, they don't have a framework. And that's one thing that I advocated for when I was running a club was, as I just said, you know, I want that continuity. When I went and talked to the coaches at preseason, you know, meetings, like, hey, here's basically our coach's handbook. This is what I'm expecting. You can, however you get there, that's fine, but this is where the road needs to lead. And that would be my ideal program. You know, my development, you know, setup. But again, you got to have total buy-in. And again, sometimes you might be sacrificing wins for development. And in an ideal world between you and I, and most qualified hockey coaches, we're fine with that. But the problem is that you've got the customers who see that win-loss record, see that league, you know, that league title, you know, whatever league they're in, you know, the quadruple A, as we said before, or whatever. They see that and they think, oh, okay, you know, that matters more to them. And it's unfortunate. It's a byproduct of our society. But again, I don't care how well your U8 team does. I personally don't. Sure. Do the kids come back and are they getting better and are they having fun? But what about you? What does your ideal model look like?
I think that's a great point. The two things I completely agree with is what the metric for retention. You know, certainly at U8, scores, in my opinion, don't really matter. You know, Bear's been on the positive end and the other end of lopsided scores, and it really doesn't matter. But it's about retention at those younger age. Does the kid, when he ends the season, sign up for another season? That's the biggest metric at U8. And then you said continuity. I think that's really important too. We have a great U16 coach who's going to be coaching our U18s next year, John Guerin. And, you know, he asks questions of our junior coaches all the time. He wants to run the same forechecks and D-zone structure and similar drills because he wants the kids to move up within the program. And he's done a great job of doing that. And, you know, that team is bound for nationals this year, you know, in about a month.
Fantastic.
But he does it. It's all on the same page with our junior coaches. And we don't have U8 and U10. It's a rink rule that doesn't allow us to do that. But that's really important. In terms of like the overall structure of the program, I think, you know, some programs, you know, have 3 practices a week. I think that's a little much for like U8 and U10. I like it better 2 practices a week, one being a skill session. When you get to like U12, I think you can start to move to 3 practices a week. But Justin alludes to a big thing about full ice practices. And I think when you get to U12, one of those practices a week should be full ice practices because it's a full ice game and you need to get on a full sheet. That doesn't mean the skill session usually is, you know, station-based and things like that. But full ice practices, once you get to be 12, 13, 14, kids should be doing full ice drills, in my opinion. And one of the big things too, and that separates Justin, makes him such a good coach, is he's a great strength and conditioning coach. And I think if you have a program that adds that component off the ice for that long-term athletic development, where they're doing ladders, they're doing box jumps, they're doing plyometrics at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you're going to build better athletes. So I think incorporating that in the program is really important.
No, for sure. When I've coached, even with the older teams. That being said, I coached Pee-wees, so we're talking that 12U level. I was there. I've coached them for like 4 or 5 years, and even at that level, I agree with the full ice. But I even break up my practices into stations where I've had it where I've got myself and 2 assistants. One's in one end zone, one's in the other, and one's in the neutral zone, and we're working on some type of skill, probably more like skating, puck handling in the middle, and then working on some type of, concepts with shooting and passing and skating still in the other end zones. But I do agree that, it should be more full ice at that level. But again, it's also an expensive sport. So clubs, I think the best thing that when we didn't have it, I think the next best thing was being able to have what we called rollover ice. So it would be an hour and a half session. You would go out for the first 40 minutes, and you would have, if you're the first team, you would have the full ice for 40 minutes. You can do whatever you want for 40 minutes. Your final 20 minutes, that probably won't even make it to the right time. But basically,
I know what you mean, though. That's great.
But the other team would come on, and then you do half ice. So maybe it wasn't, you would have an hour slot. So it was, 2 hours. But it was over a course of an hour and a half slot. Your first half hour, there we go. So I'll go back and edit that out there.
No, but that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's really good. We did that. I coached the 16s last year, then the year prior, and with Coach Guerin when he was coaching the 15s and the 14s, I think. I forget how that worked, but we did a similar thing where we were all together doing full ice drills for the first 15 minutes. Then we'd split ends. Mm-hmm. He would run his practice, I would run my practice, and then we'd reconvene for the final 10 minutes for either a small area game, or what I thought was really great was we on Fridays we would do a power play or penalty kill scenario. So his team's on the penalty kill, my team's on the power play. Maybe it's a 5-minute major, 5-on-4 or 5-on-3, right. Whatever we work it out, but then we flip sides. So each team had a chance at that. And I thought that worked really, really well. And that's kind of a similar concept where you got 2 teams on the ice, but you're combining a lot of those same concepts.
Right. And again, so that's what it was. It was basically you had an hour slot, and the first half hour was for your team only. And then the last half hour, both teams were on the ice, and you'd basically run a half ice practice. And then at the hour marker, your team would get off, and the other team would then have the full ice for the other 60 minutes. So that was one way we were able to, keep costs down. It wouldn't cost as much. But I think that's just the biggest issue is that you run into down here where, Coach Justin was saying, just how cheap it was with those community base. And I remember when I was up in Sarnia a couple years ago, we went and did the CCM showcase up there in Port Huron and Sarnia. And I remember we were in just a small rink, one sheet. It was a nice facility, and I remember asking the ZAM driver, I'm like, hey, what's it cost for, prime time slot here at this rink? And he goes, like, $250 an hour. Now, like, my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, I can't even get that at a discount for, like, a studio sheet. And here's this guy's like, oh, yeah, that's our prime time slot. So, but that was the benefit of the community-based, aspect. But
and the more rinks you have, like he talked about, having so many rinks in a certain area. The more rinks that you have, the more availability of ice, the less it's going to cost per ice session. So if you're in, I remember hearing in New Jersey or in California, some of the ice sheets are $500 or $600 an hour because there's less rinks and there's more kids playing. So it comes at a premium. But I think that's a good segue to bring on, our interview with Justin Soryal. Justin is a 5-year pro player. He played he grew up in the Greater Toronto area in Newmarket, Ontario. He played for the Peterborough Petes. He won an Ontario Hockey League championship with some great players playing alongside of him. He was I think it was his 3rd year with the Petes. He had almost a 30-goal season and was poised for a great pro career, in which he played for the Hartford Wolfpack and Charlotte Checkers before an injury ended his career. Now he's coaching youth hockey in New Hampshire, and he's one of the best guys I know. So I think this is a good segue to bring on the man himself.
And
I will welcome to the podcast Justin Soryal. He is a former Ontario Hockey League champion, 5-year pro hockey, and now he's coaching youth hockey here in the United States. And want to bring him on the podcast to get his perspective on the difference between Canadian youth hockey and what it's like here in the States. Welcome to the podcast, Justin.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Now, like I alluded to in the intro, what have you seen? You've been coaching the U.S. here now for, I'm going to guess, 8 years? So,
It's actually, believe it or not, time flies, 10 years.
10 years.
Started in
Wow.
2013, yeah.
Wow.
Time flies.
Yeah, I remember seeing you when you were a little pup and you were going to WWE and body slamming people, and now you're at the 10-year reunion.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah, hit the decade. Yeah, that's it. It's crazy. I can't believe it's already that long.
So tell me what you've seen in your 10 years of experience, the difference between Canadian youth hockey and then what you're seeing here in the United States.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few. Obviously, I'm pretty far removed from being in the Canadian youth hockey market. I haven't been involved in it. I've been, I guess, 20 plus years since when I was playing. So there's obviously a lot of differences. I'm sure that have just happened because of over the course of time. Some of the things that I didn't see when I was a kid was necessarily the focus on skills that there is now. But I think that's probably happening in Canada as well. Like, just to give you sort of an idea, when I was a kid, practice was practice. Like you worked on structure, you worked on team development, you worked on a flow drill type of thing. Whereas now you're seeing skills incorporated more and more into team practices and then into programs structures as well. The biggest, probably, there's a couple of things, but one of the things that was definitely different and eye-opening to me was just sort of like the release program, being released from a program, where in the States it was, once you've paid your tuition, you can head to any program you want. As long as you're willing to make the drive or willing to make the commute, you can go anywhere you want. In where I grew up, and I don't know if it's across the board in Canada, but in Ontario, it was, you played in your area. Like, you played for your town, and your town would have different levels, whether they had their house league team, they had, depending on how populated it was, you had single A, double A, triple A, and that was it. And if you didn't make, you'd go out for your tryouts and hope to make the triple A team. And if you didn't make it, you would try out for the double A team. And if you didn't make it, you would try out for the single A team, and so on. And you just stayed in your town. There was a few exceptions to that, but I mean, you're talking, I had a kid on my team that, had to pretend to live with his grandparents basically to get out of the area he was at. So I think there's pros and cons to that. I mean, the pro is you end up with it just being simpler. You end up with kids that can make lifelong friends because maybe they're on the same team, same group of kids since they're, 8 years old through they're 15 years old. So that is a big positive. The con is if you end up as a 9-year-old having a lunatic coach who, only plays his kid and hates you and yells at every, it's pretty hard to get away from him. So pros and cons to that. It makes it, like I said, a lot simpler. It's not like you're seeing in this here where this time of year, you can see parents, they're getting gray hairs because they're trying to figure out where should their kid go? Where's everybody going? What's the next best thing? Whereas, like I said, where I grew up, it was just go out and try out for your town team. And if you made the AAA team, great. If you didn't, you went to double A, you went to single A, whatever it was. And on that note too, it makes it so that every kid kind of finds a home because, like worst case, you're playing house league. Whereas you can see a lot here where, you have parents and kids trying to figure out if they're not necessarily an elite kid, where am I going to go that's going to have a team? Like, do you have a goalie? Do you have a coach? Whereas that's a lot, I guess, simpler and cleaner in Canada. But like I said, you have your con too of you could end up in a nightmare situation. So that's definitely a big one that's different. Is that sort of, not to, maybe bring it back to you a little bit, is that the same in sort of the Atlantic area? Like, do you find, is New Jersey sort of similar to that, or do they make it where you play in your town, or has it changed?
I got a couple years on you, buddy. You know, like, I mean, when I was
you were a kid, or is this a new thing?
Yeah, I mean, we had a guy with with the newspaper strapped to his legs and nets. You know, it was a different world back then.
Yeah.
But like there weren't as many options when I was growing up. You played for the Brick Hockey Club where you had to drive like 30, 45 minutes to go to the next place. But now they have so many rinks in New Jersey that it makes it a little bit more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of hit on something that was really interesting with with skills-based practices, and you did flow drills and things like that. There's a lot of we had Joe Bertagna on, and he talked about goaltender training and having to track the puck on the full ice.
Yeah.
What in Canada, your experience? Did you, as a kid, have a lot of full ice practices, or did they have more of an ADM style, or how did that look in Canada when you were growing up?
Always full ice. So that's a huge difference. Is we always have full ice practices, and I think there's a few things that are significantly different, and some things that are definitely better because of that. Is just kids that understand how to play the game the right way. I think one of the biggest issues that I have with the ADM model, and I think it definitely has its advantages, but is the fact that they don't stress that thinking the game is a skill enough. It's more, and I know they talk about small area games, and that helps you get into space and find and support and all that stuff, but it's different when it's on a full ice sheet and you're talking about the different things that happen in a full ice game. So I think that makes a difference, but I also think the number one thing that suffers because of it is passing. And these kids can make maybe a 5-foot pass, 10-foot pass, because they're put into these groups of 6. You cut the ice into 6 parts or whatever you want to do. And I know I'm going to, maybe somebody's going to say, oh, you can do your skills differently, where you can, but a lot of these kids can't pass more than 15 feet. They can't make a cross ice pass. They can't go from wing to wing or D to D. It's because they don't practice it. And unfortunately, some programs are so skill based where, like, I know a program, I'm not going to mention obviously who they are, but where they're set up,
it's okay. We do it all the time.
where their setup was,
you can name drop.
Yeah. The team would have 2 sheets a week of skills. And then every other week they would do a team practice. So all they were doing was skills. So they never passed the puck more than 8 feet on some butchered ice because everyone's been
not to interrupt
it, and they're out there.
Not to interrupt, what age group would that be? Was that all age groups, or was that just?
That squirt through Bantam. Really, I mean, the Mites were on a different program
Sorry.
a little bit, yeah. But part of the problem with that too is you end up with teams that have different levels and different ages on at the same time. And you can't always separate perfectly where you end up with 5-6 kids that are the same level. So it ends up where you might have a kid who goes and he's in a group where he's maybe ahead of them, and the entire time he doesn't actually make a play.
Wow.
It's so I think that's a big difference is we always had full ice. And I understand why it doesn't happen here. I think, obviously one of the big reasons is, at least where I grew up, is the majority of the rinks were town owned. So there wasn't necessarily it would be, I'm assuming, subsidized a little bit by the government to make ends meet, making sure that the lights stayed on, the ice stayed cold, all those things. Whereas a lot of the programs here are privately owned, and the rinks are privately owned. So you have to do what you have to do to make sure that the ends meet so that the building stays open. So that's definitely a big difference between the two. But yeah, I mean, any chance you can have more of that, I think team and full ice stuff is obviously, I think a benefit.
Sure. One of the things that we've talked about it, and we have a mutual friend who's in a similar situation. Mm-hmm. Derek Becker, who's kind of a late bloomer, and you've always talked about how you were a late bloomer, how at 16 or 17 you were playing a pretty low level junior, then you developed there and you got an opportunity at the highest league in Canada. Mm-hmm. What have you seen in your 10 years of coaching in the United States, some of the best stories of kids who maybe struggled in their early years but came on kind of late, and that development really blossomed at a later age?
Yeah.
What are some good stories you could describe?
Well, there's 2 kids that come to my mind right off the bat, and it's not necessarily that they struggled, because they still played they still played high level. Like, I think when they came to me when I was I coached them for U16. I think they came from Top Gun. So like they were still playing at a high level. But just where they were at, the kids, the names are Alex Steves and Joe Dunlap. And Alex he's in the American League now. He's played games with the Leafs in the NHL. Joe's at Ohio State now. And just basically, I don't know if they see this, I hope they don't take this the wrong way, but when I got them at first, I don't know that I saw it, like I had Alex penciled in to be my fourth line centerman. And by the end of the year, he was probably my top point getter, first line center. And, he was 15 then. So it's not necessarily a true 18, 19-year-old late bloomer, but same sort of thing for Joe Dunlap. Like he came in, he was on the team at 15 and I didn't play him very much. Like he struggled to find ice time. Not because he wasn't, a hard worker or anything like that. He was just a little bit undersized and hadn't developed yet. And then he took sort of a bit slower route than Alex and did, both years of 16s and then went off to New Hampton. And he wasn't really overly sought after necessarily at New Hampton, but then started to hit his stride. And then obviously I ended up at in the USHL and then off at Ohio State. So those will probably be two of the bigger ones that jump out to me right off the bat. But yeah, there's always those kids and I think that's one thing that maybe is done right with adding in the U18, is it gives those kids a little bit longer runway. Whereas if you're not good enough, like you just talked about the lower level junior league that I played in, I wasn't good enough at 16. So I ended up playing in a junior C level, which is, they're great people. And I really enjoyed my year, but we practiced once a week and played every Friday, Saturday. And there was, you could have kids in your team that were 22 years old, like even older than you can, a year older than you can have in, in the EHL or, the NAL or the USHL. So, I had two kids on my team that were seniors in college and I was just turning 16. So I don't know if that's the best for your development. It probably would have been better for me to play with some 17-year-olds and continue to push myself that way and be more with my peers. So I think there's definitely stories like that across the board though, of kids, just hanging around and making sure they're the hardest working kids and continuing to put the work in. And as you get older, you see it. A lot of these top kids fall off. They just don't put the work in. They don't necessarily want to be players. They've been the best players when they were younger, but now that it's gotten tougher, it changes things.
That's great stuff. Trevor, what do you have for Justin?
So, Justin, again, they call me a serial stalker because I just look at people's elite prospects page. No, we're not sponsored by them yet, but no, I'm not trying to name drop, but, you've kind of played with the Murderers Row of group of guys that have, again, you were drafted, you played in the O, which is fantastic. Looking at the names that you've played with, Bogosian, Downey, you're, Anisimov, I'm barely probably even scratching the surface of the guys, but, what was, and this is a little bit more of a, different question, I guess, to what we're looking for, but, what was really those guys compared to yourself? What do you think was the difference between them continuing their career or they're continuing their development compared to someone like yourself? And again, I'm not trying to knock you down or anything of that nature. You've accomplished more than
big mistake if you knock this guy down. Hey, we're family.
I've seen the videos. I'm not going to knock him down. That's for sure. Unless I've run into him and he's not looking.
No, the biggest thing, it's really one thing is skating. I just, and especially with the game now, just how fast it was, I just was not fast enough. I had pretty good edge work. I could protect the puck decently, think the game well enough and make plays. It was just my, when you put me in a straight line race against someone like Jordan Stahl, it ain't happening. He takes 3 strides between blue to blue. It takes me about 50. So, and, same thing, guys like Bogosian, they were just phenomenal skaters. I think an impressive one, maybe Steve Downing wasn't the greatest skater. That was kind of the knock on him. Was he going to make it? Because he wasn't an overly, smooth, wasn't overly fast. Yeah. But his hockey IQ, his just determination, his will to make plays happen, and he was just playing on a higher level, like mentally, than anybody else. So yeah, but definitely, aside from him, I would say skating was the big thing, and it's even more now. Like even some of those guys that were fast when I was playing with them or playing against them aren't necessarily fast now. With how speedy the game is now, how everybody just the training's so much better. The selection process of as you're growing up, they're looking for more of those fast kids, and it shows. Like a AAA team is going to pick more of their kids based on speed, and then it just keeps going. The OHL team or the college team is going to do the same thing. So I think those are the biggest things. Would just be the speed of it.
I was actually going to lead into my other
Yep.
question. More or less, with today's, as a coach yourself, what do you think? You alluded to, the speed of the game. What do you think is being done now correctly? Just as a coach, and that you're seeing, not using yourself as an example. You can if you want. I don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me one way or the other. But what are you seeing nowadays that's different than when you played? That you think maybe, hey, that might have given me a better development, or might have just developed more kids.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, the reality is the game hasn't changed that much. Like for all the talk about, oh, everything's different, it's a new game, it's a new this, it is faster, but like especially when you watch, like if you watch NHL playoffs, it's the same hockey. Like there's a bit more speed to it, but it's getting pucks in, it's getting behind defensemen, it's being able to pick pucks off the wall, establishing cycles. It's just a bit more structured now and a bit more detailed. I would say the real difference between when I was growing up, and it started really when I was right around that age, but it's just I guess the more knowledge and focus on your off ice development, where it was like when I was a teenager, you just found anybody that, a lot of people weren't working out, and if you did, you just found somebody that like they had whatever they had some weights, and you did probably an Andy
The
Tremble,
curls for
Hulk
the girls.
Hogan workout and just pumped out chest. and yeah, like I recall my first trainer and did all summer with them, and then I went to skate, and I'm like, I could not move. Like I'm like I feel like a dump truck out here. So all that has evolved so much, and I think it's gonna obviously it's just gonna continue, just like anything else. It's gonna continue to evolve. Like I think where you've seen it changing a bit is a lot of people went into it and started doing training, and like I said, weren't doing it properly, and then the injuries just went way up, where guys were having labral tears in their hips or their shoulders. So I think it's about training smart, and I think that's probably the biggest thing. The skill development, we always did that stuff. Like there was always skill development working on it in the summer and stuff like that. I think it's just more emphasized now. Like everybody's going to be doing it. Some people were taking the summer off back then, whereas people aren't necessarily now. Especially like I'm talking when they get to 14 plus. Like obviously the 8 and 9 year olds, it's pretty similar to what it was before.
That's great stuff, Justin. And I want to thank you for coming on. For you guys who don't know, Justin Soryal is one of the best youth coaches in the state of New Hampshire, and the best trainer in the greater Hooksett area.
That's it. Can I, before
thanks for coming on, buddy. Yeah, go ahead.
Before I go, I got one other difference, and I'll try to be quick here between the two. I was trying to remember when I was thinking about it. The names of teams, like, and what I mean by that is like the level names. Like I remember when I first moved to New Hampshire, I was working for a tournament company, and the guy wanted me to cold call. It was tough stuff, but cold call coaches and try to get them into his tournaments. And I had no idea who I was calling, because I would look at a program and they would have the same age group, AAA, Tier 1, and Elite. And I was like, I don't know which one. Like he's trying to run a top team tournament. I'm like, I don't know which one. Those all sound like phenomenal teams. So that was like complete culture shock for me, because like I said to you at the beginning, it was AAA, AA, single A. I think there was select if you had a populated area, and then house league, and it just was cut and dry. Whereas here there is a lot of that. Just I hate to say, smoke and mirrors of naming something, whatever premier elite, tier one.
We're a no bullshit podcast, so you can say whatever you want to. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors and snake oil salesmen.
Like imagine, I'm involved in the industry, and sometimes I look at a team and I don't know what they're going to be like. Imagine if you're a parent and you never played hockey, or it's your first kid and your first run through youth hockey, and you're trying to figure out what team your kid should be on. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you figure out the landscape, and you see that happen where a lot of times you look at a kid and you're like, why is that kid on that team? He's head and shoulders above everybody else. And he's like, well, I was told it was a tier one team. And so I think that's something that if I had one kind of magic wand to wave over in the States, I think, because I don't think you can really change, like I talked about, you have private owned rinks and private owned programs. I don't think you'll ever change to that necessarily the similar model that Southern Ontario has, where there's my hometown had like 8 sheets, I don't think you'll ever get to that. But if I had a magic wand, it would be just maybe USA Hockey saying like, you can only call your teams this. And if, and you can only have X amount of this level team. And just so it gave some sort of, I guess, simplicity to a parent who's signing their kid up and doesn't know. Cause like I said, if I go in, my kid, let's say he wants to play lacrosse and there's that many options, I'm not going to know what to do. So anyway, that was my last little thought of
that's
a great point.
Great point.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Justin. I appreciate the input and the feedback, and make sure you check out info on Justin and the New Hampshire Avalanche next time you're up in New Hampshire. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Justin.
All right. Take care.
All right, so Trevor, what'd you think of Coach Soryal's responses?
First off, thanks a lot for coming on, Coach Justin. I really appreciated it. Please don't beat me up. But I know he can. I mean, it's not that, but I enjoyed hearing what he had to say, especially about the development. Talking about the off-ice aspect of it. Moving up. How it's all changed, and again, just hearing his experience with it, just the difference between the two not states, but the two countries, and then just how things are going now compared to when he played. Again, I thought it was very insightful, and it just shows you where the game's really going. And again, 10 years from now, what is the game going to look like? How is the development of the players going to look? It can only get better. I mean, it's not that it's in a bad spot now, but I really enjoyed hearing about that, and that was my takeaway. How about yourself?
Yeah, I really like some of the feedback on the difference between the American and the Canadian style of development. It's really interesting to me. I grew up in basically a Jersey Shore town, right? Where you watch, you've seen the Jersey Shore, the show, so it's like.
Cabs are here.
Those are my people, so hockey wasn't like a priority down there, but we had the Brick Hockey Club has had some great players, like Jim Dowd, James Van Riemsdyk, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and then had my dad ran the Ocean Hockey School for many years, and that had some great players come through it. So there was kind of a unique culture to the Brick Ocean Ice Palace Brick Hockey Club when I was growing up, and there was a good incubator for developing hockey players. But now, so much has changed, and you got to stay current and modern with the changes. And it's so interesting to see the changes they've done in Canada and the changes we're doing here in the U.S. And I think that if you combine both, you can probably create a pretty dynamic program. One of the things I like best that he mentioned was talking about really the off-ice stuff, and he's one of the best trainers, certainly here in New Hampshire and certainly in the business. What are you doing in your program, Trevor, with off-ice training?
So what I mentioned was earlier, we currently use the Illinois Bone and Joint Institute. They come in and they basically run just off-ice sessions of plyometrics, a lot of different type of stretching. When I would run my own off-ice sessions, it was a lot of, athletic-based training, not just for, there was hockey focus in there. So we would do some type of like stick handling, and you'd have to do different things. You know, maybe you're jumping up and down on one foot while you're stick handling, a green biscuit, or you're doing toe drags, you're doing a triangle type move, something like that. Usually I would, again, just like I would with a skill session, is I would run stations, and I was fortunate. With the last club that I was with, we had our own off ice. It was called the Shelf, and basically up there we had our two shooting lanes with synthetic ice that I had the players shooting on. I would have an agility ladder set up, and then I would have a passing station and a stick handling. So basically, you were in each station for 10 minutes, and then we would do like a group stretch. We would do just group plyometrics to begin with. But I think it also depends on the age group. So that was, I would tailor it. It was all somewhat around the same type stuff, but I wasn't really having my squirts take slap shots, working on that. I wasn't having we weren't adding any weights or any even light weights to the younger kids, but the older kids, they could do some things with weights. And again, it was more or less just trying to keep them trying to build quickness, try and build a little bit of strength, and as well as endurance. And that was more my philosophy on doing the off ice, because again, they're there for hockey, but again, I mean, you're using the agility ladder. We're doing stuff that I was picking up that soccer teams, players are using, and football, just hoping that would translate on the ice, at least for their foot movement. But what does your off ice typically look like?
Well, the junior level, it's mostly
true.
Strength, conditioning, and power. It's a little bit different, but I think I coached the 16s for 2 years prior to this year, and we would do a lot of that stuff too. Like especially during our training camp, we would incorporate a lot of stick handling and a lot of passing with green biscuits and things like that. That I think that when you get older, it doesn't resonate as much. Like the kids don't feel like there's because they stick handle at home or things like that, but when you get kids who are in school all day and then they come to hockey after, doing that kind of stuff is really great. And I think that, that stuff, if you're doing that at U8, U10, U12, you're doing off ice that is like athletic movements plus some stick handling work, you're going to see a huge jump in your kids by the end of the year. So I think that's really, really critical.
Absolutely. There's a family that I've worked with I coached 3 of the 5, 6, 7 children. But they were, all hockey players, all just dedicated, great kids. Actually, one of the kids was playing for the girls' World Junior team, this 18 team this last year, and she'll be playing in, I forgot one of the Ivy League schools next year. But anyhow, they're fanatics. You'd see them at the rink, and when one sibling was on the ice, some of the other ones who were waiting around would just be sitting there stick handling. They would be doing drills that, dad might be like, hey, just do this or that or whatever. But they were doing stuff, and again, they were some of the, they had great hands, good vision, because they're doing the drills with their heads up. The older kids, they don't typically see the benefit, even though we as coaches know that there is, especially doing that stuff off ice, because it's cheaper, but also you can really kind of break down that technique. But I really like doing a little bit of mix of everything, because again, the ADM, even though they're trying to build long-term athletes just in everything, I think it's a lot of stuff translates from one sport to the other, and doing drills that you might do it on a soccer field, or you might do on basketball court, whatever, lacrosse. It all a lot of it translates. So that was always my outlook on it. But obviously, when you're doing the stick handling and stuff, that's a little bit more hockey oriented.
Well, I think that brings us to a great segue here. Now we've talked a lot about American hockey players, Canadian hockey players. So new 5 myths of the day. Who are our top 5 American and who are our top 5 Canadian players of all time? And I think we set a parameter here.
One rule.
One rule is Gretzky's on the list, so it's top 5 after Gretzky, because he's in there
for Canada. Yep.
Yeah, for Canada. It's like he's going to be on there for both of us. It's a no-brainer. He's got 1,000 more points than anybody has has points.
Right.
He's on the list.
It's
Trevor,
like,
you want to go first or you want to go second? What's up for you? What do you want? What do you want here?
What do we? How about we do this? Let's start with U.S. Oh, we'll start with Canadian-born players. But what if? Let's see if we. I'll say one, and we'll see if they're on both our lists. I have a feeling they will be.
I like it.
If it's not, though, we can see if we agree or disagree and why.
I like it.
All right. So obviously, with Gretzky out of the way, I'm gonna add Mario Lemieux. I mean, for sure, he's got to be on your list. Number 66 in the Pittsburgh Penguins. Just his blend of size and skill, as well. I mean, hockey vision, of course, but there's no, you cannot have a top Canadian hockey player list without Mario Lemieux.
Mario Lemieux was sick. He was sick. So yes, he's on my list. He's our number. Well, he's 1B, right? Because Gretzky's 1A, Mario's 1B. Who's number 2 then?
Well, you got to go with Bobby Orr. I mean, Bobby Orr. I mean, he revolutionized how defense was played, or the defensive position was played. Not only just as a defenseman, but carrying the puck up the ice. Sadly, obviously, injuries cut his career short, but he's got to be like 1C then if you're going to do that.
Yeah, total complete agreement. And you watch those videos of his game videos. He's still unbelievable, like an unbelievable skater. Maybe one of the best skaters of all time. And then you see the skates that he was skating on. My God, he put him in something that they wear now. It's like he would be so unbelievable. So
I think for sure, like him and Lemieux could, as you talk about different eras of players, and like basketball is a perfect one where they go back and forth. Like, could Jordan play in this era, or could LeBron play in that era, whatever. Like, I don't think anybody on the list that I have could. I know they could all play in all eras of the game.
Yes,
but
me too.
Okay, so who do you got then? Who would be your 4? Well, we're using Gretzky, so who would be your 3?
Yes. So my 3 is it's a little bit early for sure, but I've never seen a player this skilled outside of maybe Lemieux. But he's the fastest guy in the league. He's at the best hands in the league. Now he's the best goal scorer in the league because he decided to be the best goal scorer this year. Connor McDavid.
I don't disagree. I've kept McDavid off my list though because I still think it's a little young, but there's no doubt that he's going to end up as one of the best. I mean, there's no reason why. I just think longevity wise, I went with a little bit different, but I mean, he's like the human joystick out there. He's just like a video game, like 99 overall, playing against guys that are 66 overall. It's he's phenomenal to watch. So
I think if he retired today, he's in the Hall of Fame. Like if he retired today, he's in the Hall of Fame. So that's why he's on my list.
I can't disagree with that. So I didn't number it really, but I did put I put Sid the Kid on there. I put Crosby up there. And I think that one was more or less longevity. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, he was basically, him and Ovechkin were the best players in the world. And they have been for the last, 36, so probably almost 18 years. And the fact that he's been able to not only be, he's not a one-dimensional player, where you could say, Gretzky didn't really play defense too much, or Lemieux, he did, but he didn't really play too much defense, where you can say Crosby over the years, could he have gotten more points if he actually sacrificed more on offense than on defense? And I think he could for sure. There's no doubt about it. But he just, overall, he's got to be one of the greatest Canadian players of all time.
Yeah, I had him at 5 on my list. And I remember seeing him like his second or third year in the league, and I said, he's Steve Yzerman, but he's more skilled. And that's what he's become later on in his career. Like he's a gritty, two-way, tough to play against, grinding centerman, but he also can score 100 points. So I had it at number 5 on my list. Between McDavid and Crosby, there was one player, though. That's the only difference probably in our list.
Well, let me ask this. So I added a goalie to my list.
I have a goalie, too.
And my goalie was Patrick Roy.
Okay.
Which I'm assuming yours is going to be Martin Brodeur because you're a Devils fan.
Correct.
Well, yep.
Correct.
So this is why I chose Waugh over Brodeur, and is because I think my opinion, both again Hall of Fame goalies, great goalies. I think Brodeur though benefited a little bit from the system that he got to play in. Don't get me wrong, he played for some really bad Devils teams early in his career. Where I think Waugh, he played, and again, very well could have been played for some defensive teams. I mean, it is nice when you've got like Rob Blake and Adam Foote in front of you, but I don't really remember the Avalanche being the left wing lock type team, where you had Brodeur. Now, again, I know it's tough because I knew as soon as I said it, I was like, oh, Andrew's gonna be pissed. He's not gonna like it, but with you being a Devils guy. But what do you think Brodeur better than Waugh or any of the other goalies like we could have picked?
So he's the only Brodeur is the only goaltender out of all the 10 players I picked. He's the only goaltender who made the list. Waugh, that 92-93 Cup run, he won 10 overtime games. He could steal games by himself. But when you look at the overall longevity of his career, Brodeur has every record. He's like the Gretzky of goaltenders. I mean, he has wins, he has shutouts, he has 3 Stanley Cup rings, he has 4 Vezinas. I mean, and then the biggest thing with him is he revolutionized the game. They put the trapezoid in because the way he handled the puck. I mean, the guy scored 3 goals, whereas Waugh did the spin move at the neutral zone one time when he tried
pissed
to
off
handle the
Gretzky,
puck.
and he pissed off Gretzky. If you watch that video,
Yes.
I think Gretzky was throwing a hissy fit. I don't disagree. And again, I don't disagree. I kind of just went with Waugh just because I felt, again, especially with what he did with Montreal. Not that those teams weren't loaded, but Brodeur's got all the records, so it's like one of those things where now if we were to sit here and say, okay, let's talk about Czech players, I would for sure say Hasek was, in my opinion, maybe I feel he's better, but he was more fun to watch than all of them. But maybe that's a different discussion for a different day. We can maybe do Team Europe later. But so I guess then there's one player.
I showed my kids one time.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, so there was a series. The Devils first long in that run in the '94 when they played the Rangers later in that summer. But that '94 series they played Buffalo, and it was Buffalo versus the Devils, and it was a 4 overtime game, and it was a 1-0 game, and Hasek stopped 70 shots. And Brodeur let in 1 goal. He stopped 55 shots, but he let in 1 goal, and he was the losing goaltender. It's nuts.
Right. Who was the overtime winning? Who scored that goal? Do you remember?
Davey Hannon. Remember Dave Hannon?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
Classic Rick Jenneret call. Classic.
Yes. All right. Well, so that means then we got another player that we both disagree, or we didn't have on our list, so there's a little disagreement. But who was your number 5?
Well, Crosby was my number 5. So McDavid was my 3. Brodeur was my 4. Crosby was my 5. Who was your guy missing on that list?
So I actually took. So I went. Obviously, we took Gretzky out. So I had Crosby, Lemieux, or Waugh, and I put down as number 5 for me was Stevie Yzerman.
I mean, he's either 6 or 7 for me. He's right there,
Right, and again, it was more or less the fact that he was so good offensively playing for bad Detroit teams, and then he was just so good all around. Again, it's Crosby just a little bit later on in his career. He turned it into that 2-way player, and so that was my top 5. Again, you could easily throw in Brodeur. I mean, Messier, Coffey, anybody in those, but let's see.
Joe Sakic.
Oh, Sakic, yeah, for sure. So let's see U.S. players, though. I'll let you go first on this one.
Okay, I got to pull up my list here. My number 1, and I hate doing this because I'm a Devils fan, right? But my number 1, the greatest American player, in my opinion, is Brian Leetch.
I knew you were going to say that as soon as you said it's the Devils. I had him on the list for sure. I there's no disagreement here on him being the best U.S. born defenseman. Just the longevity.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, everybody's talking about Cale Makar and the way he skates and the way he can generate offense and the way he can run a power play. And you watch Cale Makar, and the first time I watched Cale Makar, I said, that's Brian Leetch. That's Brian Leetch. It's just an updated version with, better style. Like
right.
Brian Leetch, like just to tape his ankles and stuff. But like
head of hair.
But he has this. Yeah, totally. But he's the same exact type of player. Like, he can generate and drive offense, make plays in the offensive zone. Like he's dynamic. So that's my number one guy.
So my number one, don't get me wrong, Leetch is definitely he's in my top 5. But if I were to actually pick a number one, I would have to go with Patty Kane. And maybe that's the homer in me, but I think in the long run, he's going to for sure be the number one point scorer for all American-born players. And I think that his style of game is actually going to continue. I know everybody's like this year, oh, he's having a bum year. Is this the downward slope for him? Dude, the guy is just, he's a student, so much of a student of the game. Does he have the speed that he once had? No, but he's just so astute. He knows where to put himself positionally. He knows, so he's just cerebral with where guys are. So I went with Patty Kane as my number one. Was he on your list?
He's my number 2.
Okay. All right. Number 2. All right. Who did you then have for number 3? I bet you we might have the same player too.
So I got Leetch, Kane, and then my number 3 was Chris Chelios.
Okay. So Chelios was in mine as well.
Who was your number 3?
You were a fan. Well, you were not a fan of him. I'll tell you that.
Okay. Okay.
But no, for sure, Chelios. There's no doubt about that. I mean, okay, longevity. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the guy was still, he's an unbelievable player. But all right, so Chelios. I'm gonna go. I'll go with my last one. No, I'll go with the one that I know that you might agree with, but I know he definitely ruined probably some nights for you as a Devils fan, and that would be Pat LaFontaine.
Oh, he's my 5, number 5.
Is he? Oh, all right.
He was awesome. He was awesome.
I never had the chance to see him play, live. I mean, just seeing the highlights and stuff. Talk about a career cut short. I mean, he would have been easily number one if he, most likely he would have been number one if he played his entire, actually didn't have the injury issues. But as a Devil fan, I mean, you had to be pissed when he went from one Ranger team to the Islanders to Buffalo. I mean, he had every New York team. But
he was unbelievable. I mean, there was during that time period, there weren't many players that, in the 80s that skated like Pat LaFontaine, who was had such a burst and his agility was off the charts compared to some guys who he was going against defensemen like Craig Ludwig and Darian Hatcher, guys who are, who just hammered you or plodding around, or Danica. But no disrespect to Danica. Mr.
No,
Devil, but LaFontaine was just so elusive and agile. He was just a dynamic player for sure.
All right, I got a feeling I know who your number 4 is, but I'm going to let you say it, and I'll let you know if that's who I think it is.
I think he's still the number 1 all-time leading scorer amongst American players, and that's Mike Madonna.
That's who I thought you were going to say. And
who do you got?
I did not take Pretty Boy Mike Madonna. Don't get me wrong, another player who is a phenomenal two-way player. I actually went with... who was for the longest time, number 2, number 3? I went with Brett Hull, actually, as my
Good choice.
Number 5. And again, you could swap in Madonna. There's no doubt about that. I think Madonna would have been number 6, but I always grew up, my uncle used to give my aunt a hard time because she loved Mike Madonna, and just watching how he skated, and he looked so, so nice out there, and so we would always call him a pretty boy, this and that. But I picked Hull only because of his, just his, obviously the goal scoring prowess. There's no shock in there, but just how smart he was for the game, and here's a guy who is ready to give up hockey because he can't even find a junior team at 18 years old, and a buddy gives him a call like 2 weeks before tryouts for a junior B team. He makes it, scores like 50 goals that season, does it again the next year, and then walks on and plays, I think, Minnesota, right? One of the Minnesota teams.
Minnesota Duluth, yeah.
Duluth, yeah. And then he ends up getting drafted and, he scores more goals than his dad did in the NHL. So that was and actually, I didn't even remember this until I read The Athletic. They were doing their top 99 because they would do 100, but they knew, like, okay, Gretzky's number one. He actually played some penalty kill for Scotty Bowman in Detroit, just because of his smarts in the game, and so that's who I picked. I picked Brett Hull. So yeah, it's the Golden Brett.
Looking at my list, I'm a big Brett Hull fan. He was an awesome player, and like in terms of like the arsenal of shots he had, like he could score from anywhere in the ice in the offensive zone, and if you put him with an Oates or a Craig Janney or like somebody who can get him the puck, holy smokes. But I always kind of thought of him as like he's a dual citizenship guy.
That's true. That's true.
But he played on the American teams at like the 96 World Cup. He
Yep.
played the Canada Cup in 91 with the Americans. So it was always kind of like he's Canadian, but that's where like in my head I never thought that one. But I agree with you.
No, I mean, because I actually had to go back. I was like, I'm pretty sure he played for USA, and I was like 99.9, but I was like, I don't want to look like a dumbass and then come on here and be like, oh yeah, Brett Hull, and you're like, he's like probably number 8 for Canadians, and I'll be like, oh shit. So, but I didn't want to be that guy. Actually, just unplug myself here. Yep, there we go. But yeah, I mean, I think Team Europe would definitely be, would be an interesting one for another episode. But yeah, no, I mean,
For sure. We maybe talk about the some of the stuff we've seen in Sweden or Finland or Czech. We got a combine in the Czech Republic this year with the EHL, so maybe we'll do one after that trip.
So when do you guys go on that one?
That's June 8th to 11th. It's an EHL combine. It's the first of its kind in Velké Popovice, Czech Republic.
Wow.
And it's going to be fun. I went out there a couple years ago and met some good guys out there. They took me a tour of the Kozel Brewery, and I didn't really want to leave, but my wife made me come back. That was unfair. But now I said, we're going to go out there this year. We're going to do a whole league-wide combine, and I'm going to take Bear with me because he's going to get on the ice in that little barn in Velké Popovice, and it'll be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Now, is this open to any Czech player that would like to come out, or is it, how does that work?
Yeah, it's open to really any. I mean, that's a great part of that location. It's about 30 minutes south of Prague. So it's really easy to get to if you live in Austria or you live in Germany or you live in even some of like the Baltic states like Latvia and Belarus. Like, granted, there might be some political implications with the war in Ukraine, but like it's a really easy place to get to. So, if you're listening and you're in in a small town in the middle of nowhere in Europe,
those
come on out.
Areas, yeah, for sure.
That's right.
That's awesome. I look forward to hearing about that. That'll definitely have to be an episode on its own of where you just talking about that. But
for sure,
no, for sure. I mean, I think I'm pretty much out of everything material wise that I got for tonight.
Well, thanks. This has been a great episode, and I think if anybody gets a chance, make sure to check out Justin Soryal and his stuff with the Avalanche, but really his athletic company, Roots Athletes. It's a great training facility here in Hooksett, New Hampshire, and like I've said before, he does an amazing job and has already built quite a name for himself in the short 10 years he's been in New Hampshire. So thanks for coming on, Justin.
Yeah, thanks again, Justin, and Coach. I will talk to you later.
Thanks, Trevor. Have a great rest of your night.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.